Hey, welcome back. Today, we're doing a deep dive into something really different on the tabletop scene.
Yeah, we are. Forget elves and dwarves for a bit.
Definitely. We're jumping into Coyote and Crow,
That's the one. If you're looking for a break from, the usual fantasy settings, this is it. It's Indigenous Futurism.
which sounds amazing. So paint the picture for us. What's the world like?
Okay, so imagine North America, right? But it's 2112. And the key thing is, European colonization never happened.
Whoa. Okay, so what does that look like?
It means you've got these incredibly advanced, thriving indigenous civilizations. Think solar power, magnetism tech, but get this, no guns.
No guns. Seriously. Wow.
It completely changes things. Imagine a city like Cahokia, but, futuristic, vibrant, technologically advanced, but still deeply connected to its roots.
That sounds incredible. A completely different timeline.
And what makes it feel so, real is that it was created by a team of Native American developers.
Ah, okay. So it's coming from an authentic place.
Exactly. It's their vision, their perspective. You just don't get that often in RPGs. It's not an outsider looking in.
So you're in this world, Makasing. What's the vibe? I heard Indigipunk.
Yeah, that captures it pretty well. It's this cool mix, right? Super advanced technology, but it's woven right into their spiritual beliefs and traditions. They're not separate things.
Okay, like they coexist naturally.
Totally. And then there's the Adenadi, the GIF.
The gift? What's that?
Basically, after this big climate event called the Awis, some people developed these superhuman abilities.
Oh, okay, so we've got powers too,
Yeah.
like science fantasy elements.
Definitely. And that's where a lot of the story potential comes in for players.
Yeah.
How do these powers and this tech fit into societies that value tradition?
Right, that tension between progress and the old ways.
Exactly. How do you navigate that? It's not just about cool gadgets or powers, it's about the meaning behind them in this specific cultural context.
So it's not just some peaceful utopia then, there's stuff actually happening.
Oh, absolutely not. Makasing has its problems. Political tensions between nations, old mysteries surfacing, legends that might be real.
Okay, good. So there's conflict, adventure hooks.
For sure. But the focus might be different than, say, your classic dungeon crawl. It leans more into community, exploration, solving mysteries, navigating those social and political landscapes.
Less kick in the door, kill the monster.
Often, yeah. It encourages thinking about the narrative, the characters, the community first, which is a big draw for a lot of people.
Okay, so let's break it down. Someone's looking at this game, maybe they play a lot of D&D or Pathfinder. What really makes Coyote and Crow stand out for them?
Well, the first thing, and maybe the biggest, is just that setting. Makasing. It's built from the ground up from a non-European perspective by indigenous creators. That authenticity is huge.
You really can't overstate how rare that is.
You can't. And then there's the mechanics. The core system uses D12s.
Right, not the usual D20, a D12 pool system.
Exactly. You gather a pool of 12-sided dice, usually your relevant attribute plus your skill level. You roll them all.
And you need to beat a target number, like an 8 or something.
Yeah, typically. Each die that meets or beats the target number, or TN, is a success. More successes mean you do better.
So it's not just pass-fail like a single D20 sometimes feels.
Right. You get degrees of success. And the D12 pool gives you more of a bell curve, Results tend to cluster more around the average, reflecting your character's actual competence. It feels less swingy than a D20 sometimes.
Okay, I like that. More consistent, but with room for doing really well.
And then there are the crits. The 1s and 12s are really important.
Yeah, tell me about those. That sounds like where the excitement comes in.
It really does. If you roll a 1, it actually cancels out one of your successes.
Ouch. So rolling badly can actively hurt your outcome.
Yep. And if you roll enough 1s without enough successes to balance them, you can get a critical failure. Things go wrong, sometimes spectacularly wrong.
Okay, add some risk. What about the 12s?
Rolling a 12 is always good. First, it's an automatic success, no matter the TN. Second, it explodes.
Explodes.
Yeah.
Like in some older games. Savage Worlds, maybe.
Kind of. You get to roll an extra D12 for each 12 you rolled, and you add any new successes, including potentially more exploding 12.
Whoa. So you can get these moments of incredible success out of nowhere.
Exactly. It adds this great layer of tension and potential triumph. A desperate roll could suddenly turn into a massive victory. It makes rolling the dice really engaging.
That sounds cool. Very different feel.
Yeah.
What about character advancement? You mentioned less XP grinding.
Yeah, this is another big one. Advancement isn't based on killing monsters or finding treasure in the typical way. It's narrative.
How does that work?
You, as the player, Set short-term and long-term goals for your character when you create them and during play. Things they want to achieve, mysteries they want to solve, relationships they want to build.
Okay.
When you achieve one of those goals through gameplay, that's how you advance. Your character's journey and growth are directly linked to their story arc.
I love that. That feels so much more meaningful than just hitting XP thresholds. It's like your character earned that improvement by doing something specific to them.
Precisely. It encourages players to think about their character's motivations and story from the get-go. It's perfect if you're tired of feeling like you're just checking off boxes on a quest log.
Yeah, like some, early computer RPGs felt sometimes. Just grind, grind, grind.
Right. This ties advancement directly to role-playing and story progression.
Okay, another thing you mentioned was nonviolent solutions.
Yeah.
How does the game encourage that?
Well, the setting itself often lends itself more to social challenges, investigations, political maneuvering, and the mechanics support it. Skills like persuasion, deception, investigation, understanding traditions, they're just as fleshed out and important as combat skills.
So talking your way through a problem is a genuinely viable path.
Absolutely. The game doesn't funnel you into combat as the default solution. Cleverness, diplomacy, using your connections. These are often highlighted as effective ways to overcome obstacles. It's not anti-combat, but it presents many alternatives.
That's refreshing.
Oh.
Sometimes you just don't want every encounter to end in a brawl.
Exactly. It opens up different kinds of stories and challenges.
What about when combat does happen? Or just moving around? Is it tactical grids like D&D 4E or Pathfinder?
Actually, no. It's generally more abstract. They use zones, short, medium, and long range.
Ah, okay. Like Fate or some indie games? More theater of the mind?
Pretty much. It keeps the focus on the cinematic flow of action rather than counting squares and dealing with exact positioning. Think more like, describing an action scene in a movie. Fast, dynamic.
That could definitely appeal to people who find grid combat a bit fiddly or slow. Like trying to map out a fight scene from an 80s action movie on a grid. Sometimes it just doesn't fit.
Right. This aims for that more narrative, free-flowing feel.
Yeah.
Though you can use minis and maps if your group prefers, the core rules support abstraction.
Cool. And one last mechanical thing you mentioned. Body, mind, and soul. Not just hit points.
Correct. You track 3 distinct pools. Body is your physical health. Pretty straightforward. Takes damage, you get hurt.
Okay. Standard enough.
Mind is more like your focus, your mental fortitude. You can actually spend mind points to improve your die rolls after you see the result.
Ooh, like a metacurrency.
Yeah.
So you can push yourself mentally to succeed.
Exactly. It gives you agency over those borderline rolls, but it's a limited resource, so you have to use it strategically.
Nice. And soul.
Soul represents your spiritual strength, your connection to the world, and it's often used to fuel those special Adonati powers or abilities from your path.
So all 3 are resources you need to manage. Add some tactical depth there.
Definitely. It makes you think about the character holistically, physically, mentally, spiritually.
All right, so if I'm sitting down to make a character, what are the key choices I'm making?
It flows pretty nicely. You pick an archetype first that's like your broad role, warrior, scout, healer, tinkerer, stuff like that. Gives you a starting point.
Kind of like a class, but maybe broader.
Yeah, a bit broader. Then you choose a path, which is linked to a specific animal spirit and grants you certain unique abilities, often tied to that soul stat.
Okay, spiritual connection built right in.
Mm-hmm. And then, crucially, you define your character's core motivation. What drives them? What do they care about most? This ties into those goals we talked about for advancement.
Gotcha. Archetype, path, motivation, big picture stuff. What about stats and skills?
There's a neat system there. You have your core stats, but skills are linked to 2 stats.
2. How does that work?
If you're trained in a skill, when you make a roll using it, you get to use the higher of the 2 linked stats for your dice pool.
Oh, okay. So training really pays off if one of your linked stats is good.
Right. But if you're untrained in a skill, you have to use the lower of the 2 linked stats.
Ah, so there's a real penalty for trying stuff you're not good at, beyond just not having skill ranks. Makes skill selection important.
Very. It encourages specialization, but also thinking about which stats support the skills you want. You also choose gifts, positive traits or advantages, and burdens, flaws, or disadvantages for more customization.
And set those initial goals.
Right.
Sounds like you build a pretty well-rounded character concept.
Yeah, it ties mechanics and narrative together nicely right from creation.
So let's recap a basic action. I want to say persuade a guard. How does it play out with the dice?
Okay. First, you and the story guide figure out the skill. Persuasion, probably. Let's say it's linked to charisma and maybe willpower.
Right.
You check if you're trained. If yes, you use whichever stat, charisma or willpower is higher. If not, you use the lower one.
Got it.
You take that stat number, add your ranks and the persuasion skill. That total is how many d12s you roll.
Okay, build the pool.
The story guide sets the TN, let's say 8 again. You roll your pool, count how many dice show 8 or higher. Those are successes.
And subtract successes for any ones I rolled.
Yep, and remember, any 12s count as a success and let you roll an extra die. You tally up your final number of successes.
And that tells me how well I persuaded the guard.
Exactly. Maybe 1 success means they listen grudgingly, 3 means they're quite helpful. And you might have the option to spend a mind point after the roll to bump a die that was close, like turning a 7 into an 8.
Okay, makes sense. Seems straightforward once you get the steps.
Yeah.
Is there an easier entry point? I thought I heard something about a 2d6 version.
Yeah. There's a free introductory adventure, Standing Stones, that uses a simplified 2d6 system. It's designed as a really gentle intro to the world and the feel of the game, focusing on teamwork. Great way to dip your toes in.
Perfect for new players, then.
Absolutely. Or just for a quick one-shot to see if the setting grabs you before diving into the full core rules.
So overall, complexity-wise,
Yeah.
where does it sit? More complex than, say, 8-beat, less than Pathfinder.
That's probably a fair assessment. It has more mechanical bits, the dice pool, the 1s and 12s, mind soul spending than super rules-like games, but it's generally less focused on granular tactical crunch than something like Pathfinder or D&D 3.540.
More narrative-focused crunch.
I'd say the crunch is there to support the narrative and character choices rather than being purely about tactical simulation. Moderate crunch, maybe.
Okay. Now, the game's been out for a bit. It made quite a splash.
Yeah.
What's the buzz been like in the community? What are people saying?
It's been overwhelmingly positive in many ways. It won some major awards like the Diana Jones Award for innovation, art, representation. People really recognized it was doing something important and different.
That's great to hear. Any points of discussion or debate?
Yeah, a few interesting things come up. One is the nature of conflict in the core setting, Cahokia. Because it's a relatively stable, advanced city, some players coming from games where survival and constant external threats are the norm found it different.
How so?
The challenges are often more internal or social political maneuvering, investigations, ethical dilemmas, dealing with mysteries rather than, wandering monsters jumping out every 5 minutes.
So it asks for a different kind of engagement from the players. Less reactive, maybe more proactive investigation or social play?
Exactly. It's a shift if you're expecting a constant external danger fire hers like some classic 80s modules might have thrown at you. It requires leaning into the social and mystery aspects more heavily sometimes.
Makes sense. What else?
A really significant discussion point is the cultural sensitivity aspect. The creators included guidance for non-native players, specifically asking them not to play characters based on specific real-world indigenous identities or try to mimic them.
Okay. Focusing on the game's fictional cultures within Makasing, not real-world ones.
Precisely. It's about respectful engagement with the setting they created, appreciating the inspiration without appropriating real cultures. It sparked important conversations about representation and respect in gaming.
Which is definitely needed. Good that it's being discussed.
Absolutely. And, like any system, you'll find varied opinions on the mechanics themselves. Some find the D12 pool elegant. Others might find tracking successes, 1s and 12s, a little more involved than they prefer initially.
Usual spectrum of system preferences, then.
Pretty much. But the general consensus seems to be that the system serves the unique setting and narrative goals well.
So, wrapping it all up, who is Coyote and Crow really for? If someone's listening who should be thinking, yeah, I need to check this out.
Well, fundamentally, it's a landmark game. If you're interested in seeing what RPGs can be beyond typical fantasy, if you want a truly unique world steeped in Indigenous Futurism, it's a must-see.
So it's got broad appeal just for being innovative.
Definitely. For newer players, the story focus, the really cool concepts, and that accessible intro adventure make it a strong contender. You're not bogged down in decades of fantasy tropes.
First start. What about experienced players, say the D&D 5e or Pathfinder crowd?
For them, it's potentially a fantastic palate cleanser. The unique D12 mechanics, the narrative advancement, the non-European setting. It's a completely different flavor of TTRPG. Just maybe be prepared for a different style of conflict and pacing than they might be used to.
Less tactical grid combat focus, more narrative challenges.
Generally, yeah. And what about, say, old school players? Folks who grew up on AD&D or Traveller?
Yeah, good question. Would they vibe with it?
I think they might appreciate the depth of the world building and the originality. While the mechanics are definitely modern and more narrative forward than many 80s games, the focus on a rich, unique setting created with passion could definitely resonate. It's certainly not another Tolkien clone.
Oh, definitely not. So, bottom line, if your group wants a fresh setting, meaningful representation done right, and stories driven by character goals,
Then Coyote and Crow should absolutely be on your radar. It delivers a really compelling and distinct experience.
go in with an open mind, be respectful of the cultural context, and explore something new.
That's the perfect approach. Get ready for a future unlike any you've probably gamed in before.
Awesome. Well, that's our deep dive for today. It really does make you think, though. Imagine if perspectives like this had been more central. In our games, our comics, movies, TV, think about all that 80s sci-fi and fantasy we grew up on.
Yeah.
How different might things look if worlds like Makasing, voices like those creators, had been shaping those imaginative landscapes from the start? What other futures could we have imagined?
That's a powerful thought to end on. What stories haven't we heard?
Definitely something to chew on.
Hmm.
All right, until next time, keep exploring those worlds.